Now, you objected this week to Democrats trying to frame the Trump-Vance ticket as weird, which is the new talking point of the Harris campaign. You called it dumb and juvenile. Is that what you mean when you talk about the free, mature exchange of ideas? Do you think that political candidates should aspire for more mature rhetoric and debate?
I think that mislabeling or just substituting for debate, instead castigating an entire group of people as weird, I think is problematic. And I can go into it in some depth here. I think America and our heritage, our founding fathers, were in some sense weird compared to old world standards, right? Benjamin Franklin invented the lightning rod. He invented the bifocal spectacle. Thomas Jefferson invented a swivel chair, a polygraph test. They had beliefs. I mean, Joseph Priestley was welcomed to the United States from old world England because he had beliefs that defied the traditional Anglican church. So I just think part of what makes America great is that we don't dismiss ideas based on being weird. And even worse, we don't just say, oh, you're a group of people who has a heterodox idea. That's weird and I'm not going to engage in it. The way we're going to actually engage each other is by engaging in the content of our own ideas. So I do think that it is a little bit adolescent, a little juvenile to say, whoa, they're weird. No, I don't think that's the way we should do it. And by the way, I try to be consistent. I think when I ran my campaign, a lot of Republicans had a different view, right? They said that we just want to go back to a normal America. You didn't hear that from me, right? Because normal compared to what? Weird compared to what? I don't just care about making America great again. I care about making America greater than it has ever been before. I think if your allegation against the other side is that they're weird, there's two problems with that. One is it denies the possibility of exceptionalism. Okay, Albert Einstein famously didn't wear socks. Nikola Tesla had a weird issue with the number 3. You could go straight down the list. There's some German philosopher, his name is slipping my mind, but his famous quote is, the only thing worse than madness is the utter absence of it altogether, which leads to imbecility. And America is the opposite of that spirit. So it denies the possibility of exceptionalism. It got under my skin a little bit. Even see a guy like Pete Buttigieg use the word weird multiple times over the weekend to talk about J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. It kind of hurts a little bit because I knew Pete in college, actually. And one of the things that's almost certainly true about him is he was probably viewed as weird for much of the 90s, growing up as a hyper-articulate, scholastic, high-achieving gay person in the 1990s in Indiana. And that's too bad. But when I got to know him, he wasn't somebody in college who I remembered as denigrating people who disagreed with him as weird. And that's one of the reasons I actually respected him. So the other thing is it actually makes national unity impossible. Right? When you designate the other side as weird, now what are Republicans in a position to do? Well, I think Republicans could have at least as strong of a case saying you're weird because you can't define a woman, because you want to fight for men competing with women in women's sports, because you want to take away our gas stoves. That's weird. And then it becomes a context of which side is more weird, measured against a self-referential standard, as opposed to saying that, you know what? American exceptionalism involves embracing ideas that might seem weird at the time. J.D. Vance, maybe you like his solutions, maybe you don't, but our fertility crisis is a major problem in this country. We're well below replacement rate, and we're going to an economic Armageddon if we get to a ratio of workers to retirees that's less than 2-to-1, which we hit in the year 2060. But the problem with this level of discourse about labeling the other side weird is no one's talking about that, which is, I do think, a, if not existential, major economic ticking time bomb for the country. And instead talking about which side is weird versus not. It just feels un-American to me.
Right.
And so, yes, calling that out in forceful terms, I think is useful if we're able to also progress that discussion to say that we're not in the business of calling one side weird. And I haven't, I challenge you to take the hundreds of hours of footage of whether I've ever leveled that accusation against a Democrat. No, I haven't. Am I one of these people who say, I want America to be normal? What is normal? America is exceptional. That's a worldview. And I think that it is anti-American to charge at the other side the idea that somehow the fact that they're weird, it's the TikTok era's way of saying basket of deplorables. Basket of deplorables was to the Facebook era what weird is to the TikTok era. And I just don't think it's productive for our country, our culture, or the possibility of national solidarity. And so, yes, I am against it. And I stand by that.
Just to be fair here, to look at the candidate on the other side of the aisle, Trump this week on Truth Social, he called Kamala Harris lying Kamala. He called Nancy Pelosi a witch and batshit crazy. And he accused Fox News hosts of being on the Soros payroll. Is that any better in terms of rhetoric than Democrats calling him weird?
So look, I think that there's a couple things going on here. One is it was a systematic strategy. It's not one person who in the Democratic Party is authentically their own style of fighting, right? Who might have an authentic style of how they compete in the ring. I think it was like over 175 times in 48 to 72 hours on cable television, the top Democrats invoked that word weird. So this became a systematic campaign strategy and vision. I'm okay with individual politicians being the most authentic version of themselves. As I said earlier,
if it's juvenile,
everyone
it's okay to use.
As an overall systematic strategy to label an entire group of people, that's one thing. And I think that there's also a big difference here. I have a different level of concern if, whichever side it is, if you're denigrating the other side's voters as a basket of deplorables or weird or whatever, I have a deeper issue with that and a deeper concern about that than I do of individuals sparring with each other as.
But Trump has done that, to be clear. Trump says that if you're Jewish and you vote Democrat, you've lost your mind.
If you are Jewish, regardless of Israel, if you're Jewish, if you vote for a Democrat, you're a fool, an absolute fool. Number one, she doesn't like Israel. Number two, she doesn't like Jewish people. You know it. I know it. Everybody knows it, and nobody wants to say it.
Well, I mean, Joe Biden, to the extent of like Joe Biden, that's as sarcastic of a comment as Joe Biden saying that if you vote for Donald Trump, then you ain't black, to a black audience. And I'm not somebody who makes an overly big deal about him having said that. So I think that we have to preserve some level of ability to engage in humor. Humor is also unifying as a country, and I think a lot of people who just see individual clips of Donald Trump but don't know him, if you've watched over the last 20 years, he's a funny guy. And I do think that sense of humor, and I think Joe Biden, in fairness, in that particular comment he made too, was engaging in humor. And so I think if we're just looking at what's actually true, right? What's just the truth of the matter? You could airlift one particular quote or not. And I'm not here to defend one individual person or another individual person. I'm just here to tell you what I believe is true.